Trunks, it's the Trunks, very simple. Now, I admit this is a loaded title and Trunks is a very simplified answer, but for those who know, you get it. We currently live in the age of superheroes, and some would even say superhero fatigue. We're so engrossed in the age of heroes that we have subgenres of this very thing, where projects like The Boys being a superhero project while simultaneously giving a commentary about superheroes while also being a parody itself. However, with the age of heroes being seemingly at its financial and cultural peak, there seems to have been a steep dive off a cliff regarding what these projects should truly be. I'll get to the Trunks part of this entire conversation in a second, but essentially, we've gotten to a point where these edgier versions of our heroes are the staple for what they're supposed to be. The most obvious and easiest example of this would be the Snyder movies. Now, before I get attacked by that small pocket of the internet, I don't think his movies were bad. I truly don't. Man of Steel was enjoyable, BVS was decent but questionable, and I actually enjoyed his cut of Justice League very, very much. The glaring issue lies in Superman being portrayed the way he was. Batman as well, but that's besides the point because Henry Cavill was a great Superman for the material he was given, but the material he was given, in my opinion, shouldn't have been the way Superman was portrayed. The actual problem we've reached now is the world in general has become very jaded by the idea of hope. It's as simple as that. All ideas of nuance have been completely stripped from the actual world we live in, and all things must be seen in this binary view of the world. There's no room for the gray area that exists in all facets of life, and this is starting to pour over into the comic book projects. I only use this character because he's the prime example, but let's look at Superman once again. Superman has been, for a very long time, considered a boring character. He's too powerful, too hopeful, and his views of the world are simply unrealistic. It's why Injustice has such a wide reception, good or bad. It's why him killing General Zod was such a talking point when Man of Steel was released. It changed a fundamental part of the character, and in my eyes, for the worse. To me, Man of Steel and BVS and Snyder's version as a whole seemed like an Elseworlds story more than anything, and that might ruffle some feathers, oh well. However, one thing I will give Man of Steel credit for is the fact that they do try to portray a sense of regret and immense failure within Superman when he realizes what he'd done after killing Zod. Point is, heroes have introduced needlessly convoluted plot lines and situations for the sake of being edgy and different, as opposed to trying to use the stories to put a message into the world and actually accurately portray these characters. Man of Steel wasn't that, and I do believe Snyder had something to say, but Superman was not the character to do that with. This now brings me to the Trunks and the point of this video. Superman is hope personified. The reason he is who he is and the reason he's meant to represent the best of us is because of that hope. The scene of Clark killing Zod was meant to show us what Superman would do if there were no other way, no other means of saving lives. While the scenario itself holds merit, not with Superman. I'm not saying he needs to be this jolly, no frown, smiley himbo all of the time, but the point of who he is gets undermined when he's forced into those situations, especially when we see him get out of those situations in entirely different ways. For all his power and ability, he could have done a million other things rather than killing Zod. He's supposed to embody what the best parts of us are, which is why he's always able to find a way. The Trunks embody that hope in a way most of us can only dream of. It was given to him by his mother along with the rest of his costume, and Clark's parents are some of the most vital people in his development. It also means classic, and in a time where it's strictly high-tech costumes and nanotech, it's perfect. It seems to even be a meta point Gunn is making with the Maxwell Lord costumes. I remember seeing complaints about why Guy Gardner and Hawkgirl have similar looking costumes and just being bewildered by people not getting the point. Superman as a movie, from what I see, is the antithesis to what Gunn sees wrong with superheroes today, movies or otherwise. Superman himself is going to serve as the antithesis for those heroes simply because of his trunks. The look is more classic, and its creation is the literal opposite of the billionaire funding the other heroes in this movie. The trunks are like the golden age of heroes. Even if we divert our attention away from Superman and focus on Marvel, we can look towards the Fantastic Four. Marvel released their first trailer for First Steps, and the team looks absolutely incredible. The reason I'm so excited is because even before this movie, the art that was released for this set the tone for what to expect. The Fantastic Four started in the 60s and had this feel of retrofuturism very similar to the Jetsons. Funny enough, that show also began in the 60s and did a better job at giving people a view into what the future may hold, which is why the following Fantastic Four comics took such an inspiration from the Jetsons. When we look at the original art and the trailer, We can very obviously see the influence of the 60s time period as well as that retro futuristic feel. It's embracing what the comics are, especially when it comes to the suits. The version of these suits we see in the trailer is their equivalent to the trunks. There's been a massive disconnect over the past few years between hero projects and how they can lack faithfulness in terms of costumes. At the end of the day, the nature of the genre we're in is fantastical. None of what we're actually seeing is ever going to happen. It's why it baffles me whenever a movie seems afraid to embrace the genre it's in and wants to tone down aspects that seem so important to these characters, such as those costumes. The costumes featured in the trailer are ripped straight from the comics, and it works completely without skipping a beat. The Thing himself, while I love the chickless version and the practical effects, looks insanely good, and they even gave him his massive eyebrow that was a staple look for him in the comics. The movie, from an aesthetic perspective at least, seems to be like it's embracing the roots of the four and it's actually working. The trailer has gotten pretty much universally good reception, and for me, while I'm still cautious because Marvel hasn't had the best track record lately, I'm definitely excited to be in this world for the 2 hours that I'm going to be in it. Even Thunderbolt seems to be embracing what it is based on the trailers, though I'm not entirely excited for it. Not to mention, First Steps isn't taking place in the mainline MCU universe. This allows them to break free from whatever constraints they may have and just let their creativity roam free. My only real concern is whether or not these things are going to change once they inevitably get added to the main universe. Not to mention, we also have the Daredevil show releasing soon. Although I gotta be honest, it's definitely something I'm a bit apprehensive about. The original show was and probably still is a top 5 comic book project, but this new show is already off to a shaky start. A few of the story beats were leaked and caused such an uproar that Marvel basically reshot the entire first season and it's now a completely different show. From what I've seen, it's for the better as the trailers have definitely got me excited, and it's hard not to enjoy a classic sit down between Charlie Cox's Matt Murdock and Vincent D'Onofrio's Wilson Fisk. The original show understood what it was and understood Matt Murdock and Daredevil at their core, and it's something that needs to be present not just in this show, but again, all comic book media. That fundamental understanding is in the trunks. I understand this is a bit ironic considering they didn't even give Daredevil his classic double Ds, but that is entirely besides the point. Don't worry about it. All in all, these projects have been lacking an understanding of what it is they're a part of and what they're doing. I mentioned earlier there seems to have been a shift towards this very binary, nihilistic view of the world. It's not entirely unfounded given the state of affairs, regardless of where you live, but these characters need to represent the best part of ourselves. Somewhere along the line, it became the rebellious and punk thing to be hopeful of the future. It's such a weird dichotomy because there isn't any room for nuance anymore. The movies can do it, but they don't need to be in the way Man of Steel did it. I also say that to say there also doesn't seem to be any room for nuance in the way of actually looking at these films. People are either completely for or completely against, and if you're not one or the other, you're against each side simultaneously. In an attempt to view something in a complex manner, sometimes ending up in the middle of your viewpoint, you end up in this weird purgatory where both sides of that one thing hate you, ironically keeping you in that middle ground. I don't know if that made any sense, but my point is there needs to be an understanding that whether it's in universe of a movie or outside of it, nuance exists. In the same breath, these are movies. Superman is going to have an unrealistic amount of hope for the world while wearing his trunks on the outside. The Thing is going to wear his trench coat and fedora. It's just now that nuance isn't Superman forced to kill someone or contemplating his status among the people he saves. It isn't him losing hope because he thinks the people of the world are lost. It isn't even him wrestling with giving up his desire and responsibility to save others. It's now as simple as believing in his fellow man and allowing people to grow and become better because now it's the unrealistic thing to believe in. In a weird way, I hope Superman, both character and movie, can bring back a status quo for all of us. I hope it inspires a hope in people that's just no longer there anymore. I have a similar hope and sometimes naive, unrealistic belief that people can change and be better, like Superman. I hope it'll put faith in the true creatives of filmmaking and allow them to shine and bring their vision of these heroes to life, and for those heroes to go back to what they once were. It may be a little naive to think this one movie could do all that, but who knows? Do you think the cynical world we seem to be in has actually affected these movies in any way? Or do you have a childlike belief that the world will eventually move towards a more hopeful view of everything like me? Either way, I look forward to the future of these movies and I hope my excitement is eventually validated. Take care of yourselves, take care of one another, make sure you're subscribed, and of course, peace.